Razor Kitsune and a HitBox are really similar, but at the same time, they are really different. So I really wanted to make a video to showcase their differences and their similarities and give my thoughts on which one I prefer. As you can see, I have both with Soul Calibur themes, as that is my favorite fighting game, and that is the gameplay that you will see in this video to showcase the Razor Kitsune. So one of the first major differences between the two is that the HitBox will use a 5-pin cable, as you can see here. Not my personal favorite thing about the HitBox. I really do think that USB-C should be the standard. And that is what you will see here on the Kitsune. As you can see here on the top, you get just a simple USB-C port. You can unlock it and lock it. I personally like to keep mine locked just so that it doesn't get loose or anything, and then it just simply comes out like that once you unlock it. So I really think that the Kitsune wins this round easily. Nothing against the HitBox's cord, but I mean USB-C is the standard now. And then with this locking mechanism that you have here, I mean, you really can't go wrong. I haven't had any issues with the cable being pulled out. Meanwhile, in the HitBox, yeah, it does click in to the HitBox itself so that it's supposed to not come out while you're playing. But I actually have had a few instances while playing games where it'll just stop working, and it turns out that I just need to detach and reattach the cable, which can be a pain. So I think the Kitsune wins this round easily just from that standpoint. I have had no issues with it. Meanwhile, the HitBox's cable is much bigger. I've had it just stop working during gameplay, which can be really frustrating because obviously when you're in the middle of a fighting game match, I mean, you're really going to put yourself at a disadvantage and probably drop a round if your controller just stops working for a second. So I don't know if that's a common issue with other people. Maybe it's just me, maybe I just need to be more careful and watch where the cable's being bumped, making sure it's not being brushed up against something. But compared to the Kitsune, I've had no issues, so I just feel like I have to give the win to the Kitsune on this one. So one of the main differences between the Razor Kitsune and a HitBox is obviously the RGB lighting, as you can see here. Right now I have the static green RGB lighting on, which is the default. If RGB lighting is your kind of thing, then all the power to you. That's another reason why you'd probably want to get yourself a Razor Kitsune. Me personally though, and I feel like a lot of people are the same way, I mean, it's not going to make your gameplay any better. You're not going to be looking at it while you're playing. So it does look nice sitting on the desk, but other than that, it's a feature that I could have easily done without, especially if it would have made the Kitsune much cheaper or even just a little bit cheaper. I mean, you're already paying $300 for this device. So it's a feature that it's nice to have, but I could have easily done without it. So one big gripe that I saw a lot of reviewers had with the Kitsune is that it does leave fingerprints easily. I can't show you here because I already applied the Soul Calibur skin over the Kitsune, as you can see. But that's why I did it, was because I wanted to avoid the fingerprints that are not seen on a HitBox because it has this cover over it, which also allows it to be much more customizable. On the Kitsune, all you can do is apply a skin. I'm sure there'll be people out there who will be able to customize it much more than just with a skin. But from what I've heard just through reviews and stuff, it's just basically, to summarize, it's really hard to just get the parts, and then you just don't want to open up the Kitsune and void the warranty, things like that. So stuff just gets a little bit more dicey with that. And even then, I don't see, if you really wanted to customize it that much, I feel like then you would probably want to lean towards getting just a HitBox or something like that, because those are actually made to be customized and are much more accessible in that area. Whereas the Kitsune is something that you can easily just, buy off the shelf somewhere, plug it in, and start playing fighting games with a leverless controller. One more thing, though, on this topic is here's a picture that I found off the internet. You could easily just see how dirty the Kitsune gets without a skin on it. And so unless you plan on cleaning your Kitsune after every play session, you'd probably want to get a skin on there, so you don't have to be looking at that all the time. Before I put the skin on mine, honestly, I don't feel like it got that dirty, at least compared to how other people were making it out. I don't know, maybe it's just because I was cleaning it so much after every play session. But it wasn't anything, bad on the level of, let's say, if anybody here ever owned a Wii U, or even a 3DS, those had like a really weird black glossy finish, and that would just get fingerprints the moment you touched it. This isn't quite like that, but it's still quite a bit. You're going to get it dirty really easily. I made my skin on Mighty Skins. You could get some skins for the Kitsune on here, or you can just make your own custom on there. And then Razor also has their own area on their website where you can get skins, but they're just really basic skins on there. And if you already don't know, then of course there's the Street Fighter skins that will already come pre-attached onto the Kitsune, but it will cost you $30 more. Another key difference between the two is that you can see the Kitsune has a little touchpad on it, similar to how the DualSense has a touchpad on there. But as you can see here, if you use it on a computer, you can actually use it like a mouse. So I guess you can say you get a free mouse with the Kitsune. I'm not sure how much I see myself actually using this as a mouse, but it is a good little nice thing to have, and you can also use it as an extra buttons also when you're playing your fighting games. Now let's compare how the buttons sound between them. So the Kitsune is much softer sounding, especially if you're not trying to press the buttons down that hard. It's actually really quiet. So one review I actually saw compared it to the feel of a TV remote, if that makes sense. To me personally, I would actually compare it more to the sound of a keyboard and feel of a keyboard. Actually, a lot like this Alienware keyboard that I have right here. So the Kitsune actually comes across as softer compared to the keyboard, and this keyboard is actually supposed to be a silent keyboard from Alienware, so I consider this a big plus in the Kitsune's favor. I prefer my leverless controllers, keyboards, or anything in general to be much more silent sounding because I do tend to play at night. I don't want to wake anybody up, or even if somebody's in the same room, I don't, want to annoy anybody with the annoying clicking noises. So unless for some reason you do prefer to have a louder, clickier sounding controller, then this would be a plus in the Kitsune's favor. Now, these top buttons up here are a little bit different compared to what you'll see on another leverless controller. Of course, you have your normal PlayStation buttons on here. You have your PC and PlayStation mode button. And then you also have your unlock and lock button. So the PC and PlayStation mode button is pretty self-explanatory. If you're in PC mode, you put it on PC. Now, say you leave the unlock button on like it is right now. Well, then your top buttons will start working, or I guess they'll stay working. Now, on the other hand, if you lock the top, now none of these top buttons will work. So if you try and press a button while it's locked, it's not going to do anything. Same thing with the touchpad. You try and do anything with the touchpad, and it's not going to work on screen. So as you can see, I'm trying to do stuff with the touchpad, and it's not working. So it's a good option to have if you just don't want to use those top buttons, and if you want to press them on accident, then you can just set it to the locked mode. One gripe that I do have, though, with the top buttons is that they are clickier and louder than the normal buttons. Of course, this shouldn't be a big deal for most people, but for me, since, like I said, I do tend to play at night, I don't see myself using these top buttons a lot, as they are just going to be making a lot of noise for anybody that's around me. Meanwhile, if you order something like a HitBox, it has all the same buttons everywhere, so you're not going to get any difference in sound or anything, as it is consistent all the way through, as you can see. Now, one of the biggest differences if somebody is going to be switching from a HitBox to the Razor Kitsune, it was a big concern of mine going in, was the button placement. As you can see on the Razor Kitsune, the buttons are much more spread apart. There's a bigger gap between them. Compared to the HitBox, where they're much more closer together. Not only that, but I would say the Kitsune buttons are a little bit more harder to press compared to the HitBox, where they're much easier to press. This was a big concern of mine going in because, as you can see, just from the slight difference, I thought that what if I still preferred the HitBox more than the Kitsune. I actually ended up loving, though, the Kitsune's placement better than the HitBox's placement. This is all going to come down to personal preference, and I've heard everybody say different things about them. My reasoning for loving the Kitsune more is just because I feel like the spacing allows you to make less errors when executing moves. This might just be a problem with me. Other people might be better at execution than I am. But I do tend to hit the other buttons more on the hitbox because they're much easier to press and they're much closer together. The spacing also never really bothered me. I heard some people say that they were worried that, it'd be too spaced out, it would feel uncomfortable. But I actually prefer it. It feels much less squished compared to how the hitbox feels. And I also think it's better for your wrist placement, actually, because on the hitbox, your wrists are going to be going off the edge, which actually is really uncomfortable for me. I actually had to wear like little wristbands sometimes just so that it wouldn't bother me with my wrist kind of resting on the edge. Whereas on the Kitsune, you actually could comfortably rest your wrists on the actual leverless stick itself. For that reason, I prefer the Kitsune. I just prefer the button placement. I prefer that they're more spaced out. And I do prefer also that they're harder to press because it just kind of feels like a keyboard. So, it's not going to be that much of a difference once you get used to it. And then, of course, like I said, it's much easier to rest your wrist on the Kitsune. And here's a little size comparison between the two. As you can see, the Kitsune is a little bit longer while the hitbox is a little bit wider. So I'll let the picture speak for itself. Meanwhile, the hitbox is much fatter, as you can see, than the Kitsune. The Kitsune is a very slim device. You can probably fit four of these, or at least stack on top of each other, and it would probably about equal the size of the hitbox. So, if you're in the market for something that's much slimmer, much sleeker, much more portable, then obviously the Kitsune wins this round easily. I'm actually pretty amazed of how lightweight it is, even though I saw reviews saying how lightweight it was. Once you get it in your hands, though, I was still shocked of how lightweight it was. The best I can compare it to is like a tablet. Hopefully, though, it's a little bit more durable than a tablet, though, especially if you, for some reason, actually drop it on the ground. Here's just another comparison from a different angle to just show you how much thinner it is compared to a hitbox. So definitely a plus for me, at least, in the Kitsune's favor. So I thought I would talk a little bit about the RGB lighting on the Kitsune, since that is a special feature on it. In order to change the RGB lighting, you would have to press this button up here. As you can see right now, we are in the default green static mode. So then if you want to change to a different mode, you would just hit this button right here. And now we are in a different mode. So again, if we want to change it again, then we would just continue to hit this button and switch between the different modes. Now we are completely off. And now we are back on to default green. We can also adjust the brightness. Another thing you can customize on the RGB is the breathing effect. As you can see, I'm still holding down the button on the top left. And to adjust the breathing effect, you want to hold that down and then press L2. And this is going to adjust the speed at which the breathing effect occurs. So now that I press L2, it is going to be breathing at a slower rate. And I believe this has 3 different speeds. So if we hit it one more time, it will be at the slowest that it can be. So it's going to take a while to turn back off and then turn back on. Neat feature to have for those that are interested. I'll probably just keep mine though in the static default green. Now, if you're a little weird and green is not your favorite color, they do have the option to change the color. On their official website, their available colors are green, which is the default, blue, yellow, purple, cyan, orange, white, and red. Once you reach red, to cycle back, you would have to hit R2 instead of R1, and you'll be able to go all the way back through the colors, all the way back to green. The Razor Kitsune for you. I feel like if you want to answer that question, then you have to answer another question first. Is this going to be your first leverless stick, or have you already delved into leverless sticks such as using a HitBox before? If you already have used a HitBox, then I feel like you can give it a shot. Like one reviewer said, it all depends on how much money you have. If you have $300 to just spend, you've been really interested in this, you've done your research, you feel comfortable buying it, then go ahead and give it a shot. It can't hurt other than your wallet, but obviously you do have the money to spend it. What does this give you over a current HitBox? As I mentioned in the video, there's different spacing. In the buttons, it's much more quiet. You have the RGB lighting if that's your thing. It's officially licensed. It's more portable. You also have the fact that it uses USB-C, which is just much more convenient in my opinion than what is found on things like a HitBox. So I feel like the Razor Kitsune differentiates itself enough from a regular HitBox or something similar that you'll find good use for it, especially if you already play a lot of fighting games, or if you use it even for other sorts of games that don't require a right stick. I'm sure there'll be plenty of ways that you can use this, but at the end of the day, it is $300, so I think that's the biggest negative I could give it, is that are you really willing to spend that much just to have another similar controller? Me personally, like I said, I found enough differences to warrant that purchase, but if you don't think that there'll be enough differences for you to warrant that purchase, then I would look elsewhere, or maybe just wait till it gets a discount. Now, if you're new to leverless sticks, then I feel like this definitely becomes a much more harder decision, just because it is quite a bit of a jump to go from not using a fight stick like this to not using a fight stick that doesn't have the stick on it, especially if you haven't even used the stick in general. I recommend, if you haven't used a leverless controller, to at first transition to a regular fight stick. The reason why I say a regular fight stick is just because it does have already a stick on it with the additional buttons. So what I mean by this is that since it already has a stick, you'll already be familiar with the movement, because moving with the stick is just really similar to moving with a joystick or D-pad. You're just going in whatever direction it tells you to. Meanwhile, on a leverless controller, if you haven't heard already, the jump button and the down button on a leverless controller are flipped. So it kind of resembles traditional keyboard controller or controls that you would see like on a shooter, whereas the bottom button then becomes the up button. So in fighting games, this would usually mean that the bottom button is now like a space bar, is what I like to think of it as. So now you're jumping with the bottom button instead of going down, which can be a bit of a learning curve to adapt to this sort of play style, especially if you haven't even used a stick or a leverless controller before. I actually never used the stick about, I want to say, 2 years ago. So I finally transitioned to a stick, and then from there I moved on to a leverless controller. So I took it little by little, and it was even just going from controller to stick was quite a bit of a jump. So by moving to a stick first, at least you only necessarily have to learn like 50% of the battle, because first you got to learn about your hand placement, you got to learn about how to press the buttons, and at least on a stick you'll have the joystick on your left and then the buttons on your right, so then you're just kind of learning the right side in a way. Meanwhile, if you go to a leverless controller, you have to learn everything. You have to learn the left side, which is going to have the jump button and the down button flipped. And then you have to learn the right side, which is the normal buttons that will be on any leverless controller or any stick, but it is quite a difference using all your fingers compared to when you're using a pad, you're only using your thumb. So maybe just start small. Maybe you don't have to take it one at a time like I did. Maybe you can make the jump straight to leverless, but maybe go with something a bit cheaper. In case you do not like using a leverless controller, you can always go back and not feel like you just, wasted a whole $300, since this is one of the more expensive ones on the market. And you could find a cheaper option elsewhere just to get your feet wet. I know some people who are really looking forward to moving to a leverless controller, but then they end up not liking it and just going back to pad. Just because, it is like you're relearning everything all over again. And it can be frustrating for some people to start back at zero, basically, and have to learn everything all over. But if you feel like you're not going to fall into that category of people, and you are willing to grind out a specific game or a bunch of games for a long time with a whole new playstyle just to get back to where you were at on a pad or whatever you were playing on, then consider buying a leverless controller. It does have its positives, and they are fun to use. I personally, one of the main reasons why I just couldn't go back to pad was just because it is much more fun to play on a leverless controller or on a stick, in my opinion, than it is on just a regular gamepad. And sometimes it can just be as simple as having fun. You don't have to be the next Evo champion or even have to really be a competitive fighting game person just to buy a controller like this. I personally just wanted to buy it because I love playing fighting games. I love getting better at them. I feel like some people feel like they need to be like really into fighting games, be really competitive, go to Evo, go to all these tournaments just if they're going to be dropping a bunch of money on a controller like this. But that's not the case. If you really just want to have a different style of play that you think will be fun, then by all means invest in something like this. You don't have to be the next Evo champion to just have fun, especially if it's just your hobby. There's nothing wrong with investing in your hobby, and I feel like a lot of people don't really understand that, or at least they feel pressured like they have to do something more with it. But I think that's enough rambling. I'm just going to finish this video with maybe 3 reasons why you should buy the Razor Kitsune and 3 reasons why you should not buy the Razor Kitsune. The first reason you should, especially if you already have a leverless controller, is because it just offers so much different features that does differentiate itself from other leverless controllers. You do have the RGB lighting if that's your thing. You do have the portability aspect, especially if you already own a HitBox. The size difference is just massive. You do have the different spacing in the buttons. And if you currently don't have a fight stick that uses these type of buttons, then they are much more quiet. And that's a big plus for somebody who definitely will play at night and does not want to make a lot of noise during the night. Now, one reason why you would not want to buy this is maybe you just don't care about all these features. Maybe you don't care that it's more silent. Maybe you don't care about the RGB lighting. Maybe you feel like the spacing is just going to throw you off and you're not going to like the different layout that it offers compared to something like a HitBox. Maybe you already have a controller that's customized to your needs. In that case, then you probably wouldn't need this anyways. Maybe you want something that's just going to give you more customization options without having to worry about buying proprietary parts or things like that. Another reason why you should buy a Razor Kitsune is that it is officially licensed. Now, this can make a big difference for a lot of people, because I know there's some people out there who really get frustrated with having to buy different adapters just to use a certain type of controller with a certain console or with a computer, or even with things like Xbox. Now, the only bad thing about the Razor Kitsune is that it does not work with Xbox. So if you're an Xbox player, then you can either move to PC like I did, or you can buy a PlayStation, because right now it's not going to be working with the Xbox. But just having an official controller that's licensed, that has this specific layout, is rare. So I believe it's the first one to be officially licensed with this layout. So that's why it's such a big deal that it is officially licensed. I kind of already gave a reason to not buy if you're an Xbox user or something, but I'll give you another one also. So the number 2 reason why you shouldn't is if you feel like you're not going to get your money's worth because you're not going to use the controller that much. The tough thing about a leverless controller is that obviously it doesn't have any levers, so there's no left stick, there's no right stick, so there's not that many games that you can use something like this on, other than fighting games, maybe platformers, things like that. If you feel like you don't play a lot of those games, then you're really just going to have one controller for 1 or 2 games. So is it really worth $300 just for that? Would be a question you would have to ask yourself. And the last reason why you should get a Razor Kitsune or something even similar, this goes specifically for people who do not have leverless controllers, is you do want to get better at fighting games. So this is a tough one just because, just because you get a controller like this does not guarantee that you're going to get any better at fighting games, especially most people will probably get worse initially as they are not used to it. But if you do put in the work in and you continue to work on your craft, then yeah, you will see improvements because it just is a much faster and snappier method of playing these sorts of games. And my last reason to not buy a Razor Kitsune would be the price. And I know I've gone over this a lot of times during the video, but that is the main reason why I feel like a lot of people should not buy it. Even though I already bought one, I personally feel like $300 is still way too much. I mean, you're basically buying a keyboard with less keys. I just happen to have $300 that I was able to spend. But if you're more patient than I am, then I'm sure this thing will go on sale at some point in the future, maybe even Black Friday, and just wait till then. But that's gonna do it for this video. I tend to not do videos like this on this channel, at least they tend to be rare, but I just felt like I had to get my thoughts out there. This is a relatively new controller, so I just wanted to help anybody who was in the same position that I was. If you want more videos like this, then just go ahead and leave a comment. Don't forget to like and subscribe. As always, thank you for watching.